We're starting our deep dive today with a story that is just about unimaginable sorrow, but also one of really intense public scrutiny.
It is. It centers on the family of Melissa Mae Carlton, a social media personality, and her husband, Tom.
And they faced a tragedy that unfolded twice in less than 2 years. First, they lost their 9-year-old daughter, Abigail, in April of 2024.
And then, devastatingly, their youngest daughter, Molly, passed away suddenly on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2025.
The emotional weight of that timing. I mean, losing a child on Christmas.
It's just staggering. And when you couple that profound private grief with the unique pressures of being a public figure, specifically a faith and grief influencer, you get this collision point that is just incredibly complex to unpack.
It really is. And our source material today is just as complex. We've pulled from news reports, social media commentary from places like Reddit, and some really personal long-form writing from the influencer herself.
And importantly, we're also bringing in established clinical research on parental bereavement and coping, which I think is crucial here.
So our mission is really to navigate all of that for you, to unpack 3 interconnected layers.
First, there's the difficult, evolving medical mystery around how the girls died. Second, you have this highly controversial dynamic of grieving so publicly on social media.
And finally, we want to look at how established psychological frameworks, especially something called the dual process model, can help us all understand how parents even begin to cope with such a catastrophic shared loss.
It's a huge amount to cover.
It is. So let's start with that tragic timeline with the medical mystery. Abigail, or Abby, died back in April 2024. She was 9.
And at the time, the stated cause was sepsis, a really severe, fast-moving infection.
The key thing here is that her death was very sudden, and it happened outside of a hospital, so there was no real opportunity for, deep monitoring or clinical evaluation.
And that lack of evaluation just became this huge unknown, this question mark, until Molly's death this past Christmas.
Which happened while the family was traveling in Arizona.
Right. And what's so crucial for you to understand the medical narrative here is just how different the circumstances were between the two deaths.
Because Molly's case, even in its absolute devastation, it provided this critical piece of the puzzle.
It did. She went into cardiac arrest, and she was monitored in a hospital for a period before she passed.
So the doctors there, they were able to gather immediate data, and that led them to suspect she suffered from an undiagnosed genetic heart condition.
That's the critical pivot in this story. They started to believe that even a minor illness, a common cold, could have triggered a fatal cardiac event because of this underlying unknown genetic issue.
And of course, if Molly had this undiagnosed genetic condition, the doctors immediately connected the dots back to Abby.
Exactly. They began to suspect the same underlying condition affected Abby too. It would explain her sudden passing, even if the immediate cause on paper was sepsis.
I mean, sepsis is a systemic reaction to an infection, right? So the body's ability to fight it off might have been genetically compromised from the start.
That seems to be the new hypothesis. Melissa Carlton shared these just harrowing details about the emergency, what she called small miracles.
I remember reading that paramedics were only 3 minutes away.
And they were just 15 minutes from a pediatric trauma center, so they were in the best possible place for a crisis.
But even with all that, the speed, the quality of care.
They were told that this type of cardiac event is, in most cases, just not survivable.
And that clinical finality, it just pushes the parents toward this desperate need for some kind of emotional context, doesn't it?
Of course. Melissa Carlton shared that Molly had often said she wanted to see her big sister again. And this belief that Molly got what she wanted and is now with Abby. It provides a small, but I think necessary sense of comfort.
It shows you that intense emotional work, trying to frame the unimaginable in a way that just lets you keep going.
And that search for a framework, for some kind of meaning. That's really where the story pivots from a private tragedy to a very, very public debate.
Exactly. This shift from infection to genetics is crucial private context. But let's be honest, the public debate, it wasn't really about that clinical subtlety.
No, not at all. It was focused almost entirely on how Melissa Carlton chose to share her grief. So let's shift our focus there.
Right. So she's not a typical lifestyle blogger.
Not at all. She built her brand as a writer and an influencer on this idea of radical transparency, about her Christian faith, about motherhood, emotional honesty. She was even pursuing a grief educator certification.
So the whole expectation from her audience was always authenticity, not some curated perfect life.
And what's so fascinating and so deeply tragic is that the very authenticity she built her platform on is what triggered such intense and, I mean, ugly public criticism when the second loss happened.
Her choice to engage with her community in real time was met with just immediate hostility.
The criticism, you saw it amplified on places like Reddit. It targeted very specific actions, like posting updates in real time.
Like asking for prayers while Molly was actively receiving CPR or being stabilized.
Yes. And then the speed of her public response, posting these long emotional essays with professionally shot or, filtered photos less than 24 hours after her second child died.
And that behavior, when you look at it through the cynical lens of content creation, it led to the most extreme speculation.
Oh, the sources show accusations of grief porn, attention-seeking clickbait, and it went all the way to these deeply serious destructive allegations.
Questioning if it could be a case of Munchausen by proxy.
I mean, that is just heavy, dark speculation. And it really emerges when the public tries to analyze private pain through a kind of profit-driven lens.
It's crucial, though, that we step back and balance that with the counter perspective.
We have to.
Because defenders argue that for a person of deep faith, posting an urgent request for prayers in that moment, it's not a calculated content strategy.
Yeah, they describe it as an animalistic or reflexive act of desperation. It's a mother reaching out to her community, her village, in the only immediate way she knows how. It's not about engagement metrics.
And that desperation, it extends to the practical side of things, too.
For sure. Melissa Carlton said they refused a fundraiser after Abby's death, but they accepted one after Molly's. And she cited, quote, different expenses, complications, and unknowns.
Which makes sense. Losing a child while you're traveling, managing 2 sudden funerals in 2 years, navigating a whole medical investigation, the financial burden would be astronomical.
What's interesting is that the public debate online, some of it was actually quite sophisticated medically. It was moving closer to the doctor's eventual hypothesis.
You're talking about the Reddit discussions?
Yeah, we saw these detailed discussions about primary immunodeficiency diseases, PID. People were pointing out that repeated, severe, fast-moving infections, like Abby's sepsis, are often a red flag for an underlying PID, many of which are genetic.
So this wasn't just random speculation. They were recognizing medical patterns.
Which leads to this incredible tension. The online community was, in some ways, getting closer to the potential medical truth.
That there was some underlying condition.
Yes. But they were simultaneously using that same information to level these destructive personal accusations against the mother.
And the family had actually addressed this before, hadn't they?
They had. Melissa Carlton's own older posts show they had consulted a pediatric immunologist. They even had a letter to expedite ER care if the kids showed acute symptoms.
So that detail really contradicts the accusation that she wasn't listening to doctors. It confirms they were actively looking for answers.
Which points right back to the genetic component the doctors are now focused on.
So you have this devastating convergence of medical uncertainty, personal faith, and just ruthless public commentary.
It's a perfect storm.
Let's take a step back and look at the clinical science. How do parents navigate this? This is where the dual process model, or DPM, comes in.
Right. It was developed by researcher Strogan Schutt, and it's a really critical lens here. It describes coping as an oscillation between 2 fundamental states.
And those are loss orientation and restoration orientation.
Exactly. Lasso and resto.
So let's break those down. Loss orientation, that sounds like what we think of as classic grief.
It is, precisely. Lasso is dealing directly with the grief. It's dwelling on the sorrow, thinking of the child, looking at photos, weeping. That intense emotional recall.
And the research is pretty clear on this part.
Very clear. High lasso coping, while it's necessary, is linked to negative adjustment. Higher depression, more severe grief symptoms. It hurts.
Okay, so then there's the other side. Restoration orientation, resto. This is where the active work of survival comes in.
Yes, this is the future-focused activity. It's dealing with all the secondary stressors, the financial stuff, the logistics, rebuilding life, focusing on new routines for the surviving kids, all the administrative tasks.
And research shows that being high in this resto coping leads to better psychological adjustment over time.
It does, but I think the biggest insight here, for you, isn't just knowing the 2 types. It's understanding how they work together. We're talking about the buffering effect.
The buffering effect.
This is what makes the DPM so valuable. The sources show that being high in that restoration orientation coping, it actively buffers the negative, depressing effect of high loss orientation.
So wait, it means you don't have to choose between grieving and moving forward?
Not at all. It means you must dwell on the loss. That lasso is unavoidable. But your ability to simultaneously engage in future-focused activity like planning for your other children, that's what mitigates the deepest, most incapacitating depression.
It prevents the grief from becoming completely paralyzing.
It's truly about oscillation. You move back and forth, you spend time in the laws, then you step out into restoration activities. And that movement is the key to healthy adjustment, not just being stuck in one or the other.
And there's another crucial finding in the research about the couple dynamic, the interdependence.
Right. When parents experience a shared loss, their coping styles don't operate in a vacuum.
Which raises this really important question about the marital unit, how partners support each other.
And the study showed a surprising gender-linked finding. A man's long-term adjustment, his lower depression and grief symptoms, was significantly linked to having a wife who was high in restoration-oriented coping.
Really? So the wife's ability to look ahead and handle the rebuilding was a protective factor for her husband.
Yes, but the husband's coping style didn't show that same significant protective link for the wife.
Wow.
It suggests that when you're facing this level of loss, the restoration orientation of the female partner often becomes this crucial support mechanism for the male partner. Her ability to engage with the future helps mitigate his distress.
It just underscores how deeply this is a shared experience, even if it's expressed differently.
And that support system is absolutely vital because we have to pivot our focus now to the surviving children,
To Harry and Lily.
who have tragically lost both of their sisters in less than 2 years. I mean, the parents' grief is doubled, and so is the challenge for the children. And this requires very specific guidance. We're drawing here from expert resources like the Dougie Center and Hospice. You just can't assume kids will process this like adults do.
And the first step, which is so often counterintuitive for adults, is just using honest language. You have to use clear words. Died. Dead.
Which means actively avoiding the euphemisms like passed away or sleeping. And it's so crucial because those phrases can genuinely confuse and frighten a child.
A child might be afraid to go to bed if they think their sibling just went to sleep and never woke up.
Exactly. Clarity prevents that extra layer of fear.
The other foundational pillar is consistency. Routine.
In the middle of this massive upheaval, predictability is the most stabilizing force you can offer a child. Maintaining regular routines for meals, for bedtime. It provides a sense of safety when their entire world feels like it's shattered.
And critically, parents have to validate their big feelings.
Yes, grief in children is not a neat, quiet sadness. It's intense sadness. It's fear, it's guilt, confusion, and very often anger.
And the guidance is really explicit here, isn't it? Don't take that anger personally.
Do not take it personally. It is a normal, healthy grief reaction. It needs validation, not punishment.
And providing outlets for expression.
So important. Kids might not have the words, so things like drawing, writing, even just running outside to burn off that anxiety, they are essential outlets to process the massive emotional load they're carrying.
The ultimate guidance here really ties back to the dual process model we were just talking about.
It does. A child's adjustment is inextricably linked to how well the adults in their lives are coping. Parents have to get support for themselves.
And they have to avoid putting that burden on the child, saying things like, be strong for your mother, or be strong for your brother.
You can't. That adds this intolerable adult-sized responsibility to a child who is already drowning in their own loss.
So this has been a very difficult, but I think essential deep dive.
It has. Into the tension between a devastating personal search for answers, the relentless and often cruel public eye, and the psychological models that govern our resilience.
We've seen this family struggling to understand a shift from sepsis to a suspected genetic condition,
while simultaneously navigating this intense criticism over their decision to share their raw experience with their community in real time.
And the science of coping reminds us that healing requires this continuous, exhausting oscillation between loss orientation, remembering Abby and Molly, and restoration orientation.
Rebuilding life and a sense of normalcy for Harry and Lily.
And that clinical process, the sources all tell us, takes months or years. It changes throughout a lifetime.
So we want to leave you with this final thought. Given that this profound grief has no set timeline, how does the demand placed on a public figure for constant content or for a swift, visible resolution?
A need for them to transition out of that lasso stage.
How does that conflict with the clinical reality? The reality that this family's healing process requires an unknowable, indefinite period of oscillation, and that much of it should probably happen far away from the pressure of a camera lens.
It really forces you to reflect on the immense and maybe exploitative pressure we place on public figures to deliver a neat, resolved narrative of their pain.